January mornings in 1955 started the same way in every British household. You'd wake in the darkness, 6:30 or thereabouts, and see your own breath hanging in the air above your bed. Not outside on the street, inside, in your own bedroom. Clouds of fog forming with every exhale, freezing solid in the air between you and the ceiling. You'd lie there for a moment, absolutely still, dreading what came next. Under the pile of blankets and that heavy eiderdown, you'd created one small pocket of warmth. But you knew with absolute certainty that the second you pulled those covers back, the second you exposed even an inch of skin to the air, the cold would hit you like a physical blow. This wasn't unusual. This wasn't some particularly brutal winter or a broken heating system that needed an emergency repair. This was just Tuesday morning. This was every morning, every winter, every year throughout the 1950s. British families didn't live in freezing houses because something had gone wrong. They lived in freezing houses because that was simply how life was. Normal, expected, something you endured because there was no alternative, no solution, no escape, until spring finally arrived months later. The Britain of the 1950s was still recovering from the war. Rationing hadn't fully ended. Money was tight for most families. Coal, the primary source of heating, was expensive and often in short supply. Central heating? That was something Americans had, or wealthy people. For ordinary British families, warmth was a luxury you couldn't afford, and cold was just another fact of life, like rain or fog or queuing for everything. The house had one source of heat. One. Usually a coal fire in the living room, or if you were slightly better off, a paraffin heater that smelled terrible and made everyone nervous about fires. That was it. Every other room in the house, bedrooms, kitchen, bathroom, hallway, was essentially the same temperature as outdoors. Sometimes colder, because at least outside you had the sun occasionally. You'd wake up and see patterns on your bedroom window. Beautiful, intricate ice patterns, ferns and flowers and geometric shapes that looked like something from a Christmas card. Except these patterns were on the inside of the glass. Frost forming on the interior of your windows because the house was so cold that condensation from breathing, from existing, froze solid overnight. Getting out of bed required courage, proper courage. You'd count to 3, psyching yourself up, then throw back the blankets and leap out, your feet hitting floorboards so cold they actually hurt. Linoleum was worse. Some mornings, in the worst of winter, you'd swear the floor was made of ice itself. The clothes you'd wear that day were already laid out, probably at the foot of your bed or on a chair nearby. Not because you were particularly organised, but because if you left your clothes anywhere else, they'd be too cold to put on come morning. Your mum might have brought them downstairs the night before, warming them briefly by the dying embers of the fire, but by morning they'd be frozen stiff again anyway. Getting dressed happened at speed. Vest, then shirt, then jumper, possibly 2 jumpers, all pulled on as fast as humanly possible. Trousers, thick socks, maybe 2 pairs. If it was particularly bitter, you might sleep in your vest and pants anyway, saving yourself the agony of putting them on in the morning. Some children slept in their school jumpers. Nobody thought this was strange. The bathroom was torture, absolute torture. No heating whatsoever, often the coldest room in the house because of all that exposed plumbing and tile. The toilet seat felt like sitting on a block of ice. You'd perch on the very edge, trying to minimize contact, doing your business as quickly as physically possible. Washing was worse. There was no shower. That's a 1970s and 80s innovation for most British homes. You had a sink, cold water from the tap, maybe hot if your mum had boiled the kettle and brought it up in a jug. A proper wash meant standing there, shivering violently, splashing freezing water on your face, under your arms, trying to be quick about it. A full bath. That was a weekly event, usually Sunday night, and involved an immersion heater that took hours to warm enough water for one bath that the whole family would share in sequence, youngest to oldest. Many mornings, you'd skip washing entirely. A quick splash of cold water on your face if you were feeling brave. Otherwise, just get dressed and get downstairs to where the only warmth in the house existed. Downstairs, your mum would already be up, probably had been for an hour trying to get the fire going. Coal fires didn't just light themselves. You needed kindling, newspaper, patience, and a fair bit of luck. Some mornings the fire simply wouldn't catch. The the coal too damp, the chimney drawing badly, and you'd all sit there in coats eating breakfast by a fireplace that mocked you with its coldness. If you lived through it, you'll remember breakfast in winter, sitting at the kitchen table in your coat, sometimes wearing gloves with the fingers cut off so you could hold your spoon. Porridge was the meal of choice because it was hot, cheap, filling. You'd eat it quickly before it cooled, because once porridge went cold, it was like eating wallpaper paste. Toast, if you were having it, would be made on a toasting fork held over the fire, assuming the fire was going. Butter would be rock solid from sitting in the pantry overnight. You'd have to scrape it across the toast hard enough to tear holes in the bread. The one warm room was the living room, if the fire had caught properly. That's where the family congregated. That's where you'd get dressed for school if you'd been smart enough to bring your clothes down the night before. That's where you'd do homework later, huddled as close to the fire as possible without actually burning yourself. That room might reach a temperature that was almost comfortable, maybe 60 degrees if you were lucky, while the rest of the house sat at 40 or below. But here's what modern people don't understand. You couldn't just stay in that one warm room all day. Life happened in the rest of the house. Cooking happened in the kitchen, which was freezing. The scullery, where dishes were washed, had no heating at all. Bedrooms, where you spent 8 hours every night, were Arctic. You lived your life moving between extreme cold and one pocket of relative warmth, never quite warm enough, never quite comfortable. Children would fight over who sat closest to the fire, literally fight, pushing and shoving and arguing. The chair nearest the fire was prime real estate, but you couldn't get too close because your mum would worry about your clothes catching fire, or you'd roast on one side while freezing on the other. You'd sit there, face and chest warm, back and legs cold, and every so often you'd have to turn around like a rotisserie chicken to even out the warmth. School was often warmer than home, which tells you everything you need to know. Schools had big radiators, thick walls, hundreds of children generating body heat. You'd arrive at school frozen from the walk, wearing whatever coats and scarves your family could afford, and spend the first half hour of lessons trying to get feeling back into your fingers and toes. Please subscribe to the channel to keep these stories alive. Going to bed at night was a dreaded ritual. By 7 or 8 p.m, the living room fire would be dying down. Coal was rationed, expensive. You couldn't keep it burning all night. Your parents would bank the fire, covering the coals with ash to keep some heat until morning, and that would be it. The house would begin its slow descent into proper cold. Bedtime meant going upstairs to a bedroom that had been unheated all day, your breath visible the moment you opened the bedroom door. The bed itself would be freezing, the sheets like ice, the blankets stiff with cold. Getting into that bed took courage, equal to getting out of it in the morning. Some families had hot water bottles, rubber or stone bottles filled with boiling water from the kettle, wrapped in a towel, placed in the bed an hour before sleep to take the worst edge off. If you were lucky, you got your own. More likely, you shared one between 2 or 3 children. You'd fight over it, clutching it to your chest, trying to steal its warmth before it went cold around midnight. Many families couldn't afford hot water bottles. Some used heated bricks wrapped in cloth. Some used nothing at all. You just got into the frozen bed and endured, curled into the tightest ball possible, trying to create a warm pocket under the blankets using nothing but your own body heat. The blankets themselves were heavy. Proper wool blankets, thick and scratchy, 2 or 3 of them piled on top of you along with an eiderdown, the combined weight so heavy you could barely move once you were in bed. But you needed that weight, that thickness, because it was the only thing keeping you from freezing. Some children slept in their clothes, not just underwear, but jumpers, sometimes even coats. You'd put on extra socks, pull your pajamas over your day clothes, add a dressing gown on top, and burrow under the blankets like you were preparing for Arctic exploration. Nobody judged you for it. Everyone did the same thing. The worst part was needing the toilet in the night. That meant leaving the tiny warm cocoon you'd created under the blankets, venturing out into a bedroom so cold your eyes watered, going to a bathroom that was somehow even colder, then trying to fall asleep again in a bed that had gone cold during your absence. Many children, and you won't find this in history books but it's true, used chamber pots kept under the bed rather than face that freezing walk to the bathroom. Morning would come and the cycle would begin again. Frost on the inside of the windows, your breath visible, the the cold hitting you like a wall. Another day of managing cold, enduring cold, working around cold. If you remember waking up to ice on your bedroom windows, share your story in the comments. But here's what's remarkable. This wasn't considered unusual. This wasn't something people complained about endlessly or wrote letters to newspapers about. This was just how life was. British families didn't see themselves as suffering. They saw themselves as getting on with it, making do, managing. The stiff upper lip wasn't just about emotional restraint, it was about physical endurance too. Class made little difference to the cold. Yes, wealthier families might have bigger fires or better quality coal, maybe 2 warm rooms instead of 1. But central heating was so rare in 1950s Britain that even the relatively well-off lived in houses that would be considered uninhabitable by modern standards. The doctor's children, the solicitor's children, the shop owner's children, all woke up to frozen bedrooms and ice on the windows. Communities adapted in small ways. Neighbours would share coal when someone ran short. Children would cluster together for warmth walking to school. Families would gather in the one warm room after tea, the wireless playing, everyone in their warmest clothes, just being together because it was warmer than being apart. The cold affected everything. Milk delivered to doorsteps would freeze, the cream pushing up through the foil cap like a little frozen tower. Pipes would freeze and burst. Butter stayed solid. Meat in the pantry needed no refrigeration because the whole house was essentially a refrigerator. Your mum would hang wet washing outside even in winter because at least it would freeze dry rather than staying damp and mouldy in the house. Children who grew up in these conditions developed a tolerance for cold that seems superhuman now. You'd play outside in winter wearing a jumper and shorts because that's what children wore, and while you were cold, you were no colder than you'd be inside. Football in the snow, building snowmen, sledging, all done in clothing that would be considered criminally inadequate today. You just accepted it. Cold was normal. The health implications were real but rarely discussed. Chilblains were common, painful swelling of fingers and toes from repeated exposure to cold. Respiratory infections thrived in cold, damp houses. Elderly people and infants died from hypothermia in their own homes, though it wasn't called that then. It was just called the cold got them, or winter took them, as if this was an inevitable natural process rather than preventable deaths. But families survived. They adapted, endured, and got on with life. The cold was just one more challenge in a decade full of challenges. Post-war Britain was about rationing, rebuilding, making do with less. Cold houses fitted right into that narrative of endurance and resilience. Looking back now, it seems barbaric. How did families live like that? How did children sleep in coats? How did anyone survive winters in houses where ice formed on the inside of the windows? The answer is simple, because there was no alternative. You couldn't afford to heat the whole house. The technology for central heating existed, but was far beyond the reach of ordinary families. So you adapted. You layered clothing. You huddled around the one fire. You went to bed early to save coal. You survived. The changes came slowly through the 1960s and 70s. Gas central heating became more affordable. Electric heaters improved. Standards of living rose. New houses were built with insulation, with heating systems, with an understanding that people shouldn't have to choose between being warm and being able to afford food. But for those who lived through the 1950s, cold houses were just part of childhood, part of life, part of being British. Today, when the heating breaks down, it's an emergency. Engineers are called, complaints are made, compensation is demanded. The idea of living for an entire winter in a house with one source of heat, of sleeping in coats, of ice forming on the inside of your windows, seems impossible. But it wasn't impossible. It was reality. It was normal. It was just how British families survived freezing houses in the 1950s. Share your memories in the comments. Hit subscribe to keep these stories of British life alive. And remember when being warm was a luxury, not a right, and British families endured it all with tea, thick jumpers, and that unshakable belief that tomorrow would be slightly better than today.